But to just automatically assume that animals that lack a whole bunch of other traits that humans have magically have that same capacity for pain or suffering, I just don't see where the argument would come from to support that state.
Well, I don't know what he means by, I guess, so when he says the same capacity, I don't think animals can suffer as intensely as humans. But I think all the, like, if you observe all this behavior that doesn't even mention, the more safe bet, the more likely scenario is that they are conscious and they can suffer.
But it would be more ethical to leave that animal in the wilderness where another set of animals could, kill it, often in kind of painful, excruciating ways, before they can...
Like, we literally have bred species into existence just for factory farming. These are animals that some of these have, like, never even existed in the wild.
Assume it.
If humans were 51%, like 51% of humans born were, like, severely mentally disabled or whatever, would we no longer be of a kind that was rational enough to have whatever moral systems? Liking and subscribing helps me continue to produce content and is greatly appreciated. You can also make sure to catch these debates live either here on YouTube or in the description there are links to my Twitch, my Kick, and my Twitter.
My argument is very simple. First, I claim that it is deeply wrong to cause enormous amounts of pain, suffering, and death, even to animals, for comparatively trivial benefit. This is a modest claim. It doesn't require controversial views about animal rights or how much moral status animals have. It supports some of our most basic intuitions. For instance, most of us would agree that it would be seriously wrong to light a cat on fire for the sake...
How do you have YouTube Premium? I pay $15 a month for YouTube Premium.
...of hearing its screams. My second claim is that in ordinary circumstances, when we buy or consume animal products, we cause massive amounts of suffering for trivial benefits. Consider some of the facts about factory farming as of 2025. Nearly all breeding pigs live in crates so small that they can't turn around. Piglets are castrated and mutilated without anesthetic. Many pigs arrive at slaughter with pneumonia. Transport alone kills hundreds of thousands. For broiler chickens, they're bred to grow so fast that most spend their lives in pain or are unable to walk. About 500,000 birds per year are boiled alive due to improper stunning methods installed in tanks.
Too much, man. YouTube Premium is definitely worth it for me.
Hens live in cages smaller than a sheet of paper. Male chicks, about 7 billion a year, are killed on their first day of life because they're deemed unfit for the egg-laying hen industry. For years, scientific consensus has held that non-human animals experience pain and pleasure much like we do. As the 2012 Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness states, the weight of evidence indicates that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. What makes torture morally bad is the intrinsic character of the experience, the way it feels from the inside, not the species or intelligence of the victim. A typical meat eater causes animals to spend about 132,000 extra days, that's roughly 364 years, on factory farms. Causing 364 years of torture is presumptively wrong. So the question is
now, how can we steal? YouTube Premium does add the skip ahead. I think that's still premium exclusive. I believe that's premium exclusive. The skip ahead button, which will skip sponsorships for you.
Do we have a sufficiently good reason for doing this? For most of us, we clearly don't. Animal products taste great. I will be the first person to admit this. And they're probably better than plant-based products. But our gustatory pleasure is clearly a bad justification for justifying...
that's kind of true. But also, taste is just largely a matter of habit. If you just eat, the same type of food for a while, you don't really have, you don't have the same cravings anymore. It is just a thing of a habit.
Admit this. And they're probably better than plant-based products. But our gustatory pleasure is clearly a bad justification for justifying torturing sentient beings. Especially for someone like Destiny, with the platform that you have, the stakes are even higher. If you convince just 3% of your average viewers to go vegan, you could help spare roughly 210,000 animals from some of the worst misery ever experienced by sentient beings. So my question to you, Destiny, is why aren't you vegan yet?
Okay, I think that there are two huge problems with veganism that I think vegans hand wave away, and they just kind of assume are, one is that the thing doesn't matter, and then the second is that we just kind of take it for granted. So the first thing that I will say is it's strange to speak about moral ways to treat any class of things that will never themselves be able to conduct themselves in moral ways. I don't think that's a request that we would ever make of any group of people or any individual, that you would treat, some person or something or some entity that can never develop morality or any kind of moral systems on their own. So in a world with humans,
I don't see how that disputes the sort of basic syllogism he gave, that we causing an immense amount of suffering for trivial benefits is wrong. Eating meat causes an immense amount of suffering for trivial benefits. I don't see why sort of if we're saying the trait essentially that makes animal suffering not matter is that they aren't of a rational
person
kind
or something
that
or
could develop morality based on their own.
Entity.
But that seems totally, to me, that doesn't seem particularly relevant. You can imagine, obviously, it's weird that he says some person here or whatever, because I would imagine if you said if disabled people who just truly could not develop any understanding of morality, it would not be, I don't believe it would be moral to cause an immense amount of suffering to them so we could eat them.
That we would ever make of any group of people or any individual, that you would treat, some person or something or some entity that can never develop morality or any kind of moral systems on their own. So in a world with humans, we talk about farming a pig as being this deeply unethical thing, but if you remove the human aspect from it, you put the pig in the wild and some tiger, I don't think pigs and tigers live together, but whatever fucking animal eats pigs, right? If this thing were to encounter the pig and eat it from the nuts up or whatever, because based on the videos I've seen on YouTube, it's a real crazy way that they hunt, that somehow that situation is a morally preferable one to factory farming. The reality is
it doesn't even necessarily, so it doesn't necessarily have to be morally preferable. Like you can hold, for example, like I do care about the suffering of wild animals. To be open to drag me into VC, I want to get, sorry, Darko, I want to get, I'm watching this, I gotta get to bed. Okay, dude, I have so much fucking English work that I have to speed run through. Also, no worries. I'm sure I'll do it. I'm sure I'll do it. Okay, I just have like 14 assignments to do in like 5 days, basically. I think that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to like. I don't even think you necessarily have to hold it's morally preferable, right? Like they could be the same, and it would still like it could still be wrong to. A good GPA is important for flexing. That's true. I think it's more honestly. I don't care about my GPA that much. I think it's a prerequisite for like a class I'm taking next semester, and I think would fuck me over if I like fucking failed it. But regardless, like if there are only 2 possible worlds, one of which a pig is eaten by a tiger, and one of which a pig is eaten by some, but by like human or whatever, and assuming that the amount of suffering is equal in both of them, whatever. I don't think either one of those is preferable to the other one, but I would still hold that causing a lot of suffering by eating meat is wrong, is bad, is not bad.
That given a world where humans don't exist, where factory farming doesn't exist, all of the same type of animal suffering basically exists, completely unstopped and unchecked by any animal, because nobody would even develop any moral system from these creatures until humans evolve. They would never check any.
Like I think either like the argument of wild animal suffering, like it would get you to, oh, we should also care about wild animal suffering, or it would just get you to make some distinction between like commission and omission, right? Like it would just like. Obviously, we probably we might have some stronger obligations to like animals that wouldn't exist otherwise if it weren't for us, or we probably have more of an obligation to not bring into existence net negative lives or whatever than to stop the ones that are already like in existence or whatever. I like to taste the shrimp, sue me.
Any of it. And so I don't know why there's a morally preferable world where animals exist that hunt other animals to the one that exists right now where humans factory farm animals, unless we just say animals.
But we also animals like
themselves in a preferable world where animals exist that hunt other animals to the one that.
It's not like because we do factory farming, animals don't hunt other animals. We both exist. So basically, we should be fine. Eugenics, true.
Exists right now where humans factory farm animals, unless we just say animals themselves never develop the mind to have the agency to have any kind of moral culpability for any of the actions that they take. I'm not aware of any vegans saying that we should be charging animals that are carnivorous with crimes so they murder another animal, but
me for real. I don't think animals are, because animals are not of the rational kind that can develop morality, as Destiny mentioned. Like I don't think animals are sort of morally culpable for the actions they do. I don't even really I'm a determinist, so like I don't even like I don't think humans have, certainly I don't believe we have free will of the type that would really make you like truly morally responsible for at least most of the actions that you do. I don't think that forbids me from saying certain actions are not good and certain actions are not bad.
For some reason we consider it unethical if a human consumes one for food. The second issue has to do with this concept of a mind like ours. I'm aware that mammals all possess like similar substrates, similar parts of the brain that do the things that our brain does, but I think it's pretty clear that none of these animals seem to have developed a mind like ours, such that there is no emergent culture, no emergent like real language capacity or communication skills, or the ability to understand things in the past, present, and future, or in other areas of different.
I think you need to bite the odd order predator bullet, though. I think there are like probably. I think there are ways you could not do it. Like I do care about wild animal suffering. If you believe black people live worse lives on average, worse on average does not mean that negative. Would it be morally acceptable to avoid black people? No. I don't care about average utility. I care about total utility. But I think there are probably ways to just say like, oh, it's more wrong to bring in animals to existence for the sole purpose of torturing them and eating them than it is to simply like allow animals that exist in the wild to just continue existing even if they live negative lives. I'm taking notes. We can chat some time during not vitals. No worries. I don't talk about veganism that much, but sure.
parts of time. These are all like really sophisticated things that humans have developed, and I think also go into our understanding of things like pain and suffering as well. You can see an animal that gets hurt and it seems to have pain, and it might even develop some kind of like associative responses to stimuli in the environment, and it looks bad, and it pulls at our heartstrings, and I definitely understand that. But I mean, I would harken to the first thing in that for the moral argument, in the wild, these animals will never develop these moral systems, and then to the second thing, to say that we understand that their understanding of pain or suffering is similar to ours is a statement that I just don't think we can make. I don't know if we'll ever be able to make that statement. We can't even see consciousness really in other people. We just kind of assume it's there when the parts of the brain are communicating, and they seem to have a conscious experience like ours. But to just automatically assume that animals that lack a whole bunch of other traits that humans have magically have that same capacity for pain or suffering, I just don't see where the argument would come from to support that statement.
Well, I don't know what he means by, I guess, so when he says the same capacity, I don't think animals can suffer as intensely as humans. But I think all the, like, if you observe all this behavior that doesn't even mention, you should, you know, like the more likely scenario is that they are conscious and they can suffer. Veganism would never be widespread as long as chicken tastes as good as it does. I mean, I don't entirely disagree with you, Easy Money, but I hate veganism with abortion debates. It is, I do, and it's so annoying. Every Unfucking America tour is half veganism and half abortion, bro. But I think we could stay in an interesting conversation for 12 minutes. Let's go. I mostly agree. That is true. It is based easy content.
Statement.
So there's a lot to parse there. I guess the first thing I would ask is, I don't think you fully addressed the claim that I'm making, which is this intuition that we have that it would be wrong to torture a dog for the sake of hearing its screams or something like that. Most of us have this kind of intuition. My question is, how can we explain this intuition except for the principle that it's wrong to cause massive amounts of pain and suffering to beings, even animals, for the sake of relatively trivial benefits like, you know, the pleasure of hearing them scream? So how are you going to explain that principle without, you know?
Yeah, I would argue there's two senses of intuition pumping that's happening here. The first is that I think we heavily associate dogs with like man's best friend. Like we've bred them to literally be domesticated animals that are friendly with humans. So the idea that you would be killing one, especially in a way where you're literally just doing it to, you know, have some kind of like weird pleasure, I think that hits against that. But I think people also get similar feelings, funnily enough. I watched this unfold in a Twitch stream once where a bunch of people were abusing this robot that was walking back and forth. They were kicking it, it was falling over, and people were like feeling kind of sad. I'm sure people watched Blade Runner 2049. They felt sad when the one like stick lady got stepped on or whatever, and even though she's a robot, like we have intuitions for these things, but I don't know if that like tells us anything about the nature of the animal itself, because if I were to look historically, it seems like hunting developed as a strong thing that was intuitively correct for basically all of human society. I'm not aware of any like huge civilizations. I don't know how common it is that
I guess I'm not. So I like Destiny, I guess, somewhat correct in that, you know, we can obviously overfit intuitions essentially, and our intuitions can be mistaken. Now, you know, and like obviously culturally it makes sense why we would have a stronger intuition that dog, like it's more immoral to you know, to kick dogs or whatever than it is to do whatever to animals that we don't treat the same way. I don't think that, like, I mean, so part of it is I would have, well, I don't know if this is the most effective strategy. For me personally, like I just have a very strong intuition that like pleasure and suffering matter, and like that's a very fundamentally intuitive thing to me, and I don't see any relevant distinction between you know, the other than the, you know, intensity obviously, but between the suffering of an animal and a human, it seems entirely arbitrary to me to have some distinction that's based on DNA, based on sort of being of a rational kind or whatever.
I guess Indians are vegetarian or vegan.
I don't think obviously the hunting, you know, that was more or less out of necessity, and it makes sense why, like, Destiny's appealing to like culturally developed intuitions, and it's obviously likely that it would be a culturally relevant intuition that hunting is acceptable in hunter-gatherer societies.
But like for the most part, like every human civilization seems to have developed some form of like hunting or animal agriculture, and there wasn't this huge intuitive pushback against everybody doing it. Sorry, that was long. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still not sure you fully addressed. So you addressed some like reasons why we have these intuitions, but you didn't explain why these intuitions don't show that the action is wrong. That, you know, I guess what precisely is it?
If you're appealing to intuitions and he provides an explanation for why our intuitions could be mistaken, like that's responsive. But
that makes torturing a dog for the sake of hearing its screams, or, you know, kicking a robot or something. What makes those actions wrong?
Well, I mean, I feel like the thing that's wrong is it feels like anytime somebody is engaged in some kind of like needless destruction, or is getting some kind of like pleasure out of seeing something else, you know, either break or be in some kind of pain, I think that as people, that just kind of throws up a red flag that it's unlikely that somebody's going to do that to, you know, an inanimate object or an animal, especially one that's bred to be like friendly with us, and not also do that same thing to other people. I think that's the thing we just immediately kind of recoil from. Okay,
so I mean, to be clear, we put people who torture dogs in prison for many years. I think it's up to 7 years in some states. So you're saying the reason we do this is because it's indicative of some kind of cruel disposition that they might, you know, behave in other ways, in other wrong ways to other humans. Is that fair to say?
Well, if you're asking me where the law comes from, I mean, that's a complicated. But I would say
what would justify that putting people in prison for 7 years? I mean, maybe you think that we shouldn't put people in prison for 7 years who, you know, ruthlessly torture a dog for the sake of hearing their screams.
I mean, I would find more alignment with vegans there, and that I think it's strange to put people in prison for, you know, torturing animals like dogs, but animal agriculture is acceptable. But people obviously have a lot of issues with that who are meat eaters. So, but yeah, I mean, I would argue that it's probably because of like there's some kind of like sociopathic tendency or disposition there where you're just beating on a thing to feel good about yourself, whether it was an inanimate object or a dog or a cat or whatever. I think most people would do that in a very reprehensible light.
But I don't think I think that can be an explanation of the intuition again, but that doesn't substantially address the issue that like what makes suffering, bad or not bad is sort of not how visible it is. It's not how, it's not the fact that you're taking pleasure in someone else's suffering. It's simply that, wait, Nonfon, does he, Colin? I do. I mean, I guess I don't like I said, I don't talk about veganism that much. I don't think I've ever had a formal veganism debate. I guess I talked to Ryan about the Shrimp Welfare Project, and I've just had some conversation about it with people in VC or whatever, but it's not something I really like to focus on, I guess. But the left should be conversing on how best to counteract Nicholas J. Fuentes, not this. That's true.
I don't think it speaks to like any kind of like intrinsic moral value or moral character from the creature itself.
Okay, and
otherwise I would ask, like, why were so many different civilizations okay with developing hunting? Like, how were they able to get past this built-in? You say we have a deep moral intuition against animal cruelty. Why were so many people okay with hunting for animals?
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that's extremely divorced from the kind of suffering we inflict on animals today. I mean, hunting for an animal is
obviously out of necessity back then. If you want to fight Nonfon for 20, your mother is a nice one. What?
Is nothing like the way that we procure and consume animal products today. As I mentioned, factory farming is one of the greatest sources of suffering on the planet if you think that animals are sentient. And I think that probably sufficiently explains the difference.
Do you think, I'm just curious, just real quick on that, would you be okay with animal agriculture if it was like, I forget what they call it, like torture-free farms
like
or whatever, like that kind of stuff? Is that an okay form of animal ag to you?
I think it would significantly reduce the badness of something like industrial animal agriculture. But I think there are like a lot of problems with this today. I mean, first of all, there's no such thing as a humanely raised animal. At least it's very hard to find them and like eat them multiple times a day. For one, if you purchase eggs, no matter if they're the pasture-raised eggs, you get them from your aunt's backyard or something.
Okay, 3 hours.
It is
nice.
Almost 100% likely in the United States that this egg came from an egg-laying hen who was hatched in a hatchery where the male chicks are macerated.
It's like within a rounding error. Like almost all animals are factory farmed in the U.S. and it's even like I could obviously imagine a humane way to fucking eat eggs and stuff, but what he's saying is right. And also even in cases where we have fucking cage-free birds or whatever, which cage-free is still on the whole like way inhumane. Like we've selectively bred a lot of animals to be fucking egg-laying, milk-producing machines, such that like even just living relatively normal lives causes some like it could be painful. It could be it's dangerous, right? It can be dangerous. In a sense that like chickens that we have bred to be egg-laying machines can get like egg-bound really easily, where like an egg gets stuck in their cloaca. So
because they're just not, you don't need them to lay eggs in the egg-laying hen industry. So I mean, in practice, there's no such thing as a humanely raised animal product, at least completely humanely raised. And then the second thing is just, I mean, when we think about the way that eating animal products affects our psychological attitudes towards beings that we think have some sort of moral value, it's clearly going to affect it negatively, right? I mean, there have been psychological studies that show people who, consume meat, humanely raised meat, the most humanely raised they can find, tend to care less about the suffering of animals. They've done studies on this.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? People that find the most humanely raised meat possible care less about the suffering of animals?
Yeah. So I can't remember exactly how the study worked, but they found people who claim to consume only humanely raised meat and perform a few like psychological evaluations and find
male
that
chickens get made into
less likely to care about the suffering of animals. They're
male chicks,
more careless about suffering of animals.
They do get is it a chick culling or whatever? They get I don't actually know if they use any of the meat for them. I don't think they do. But yeah, they get ground up.
Are callous to it.
Why do they eat more humanely raised products? I'm assuming they cost more then, no? Isn't that kind of weird? Or what was the explanation for that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
But besides that point, I think in practice, like I said, it's extremely hard to find humanely raised products
in the US. I don't know
in the real world. So you'd have to be like extremely diligent, almost as much as a vegan, in how your effort to.
Donald Trump actually did. I actually don't know who went through. He did actually want to repeal a lot of the like state level protections for certain animals that we had, like that mandated. Certain states had like mandated, pigs have to have enough room in their crates to fucking stand up.
Reduce the suffering you cause with your animal product choices.
Theoretically, if you could do it though.
Sure. Yeah, that was the original question.
Because my next question is going to be, it feels like then we're already closer in agreement on my end because you're putting them in some different category, because I don't think we would ever agree that there's like a morally okay way to raise and eat humans, right? So it seems like we're already putting animals in some different category.
Well, I mean, I would, like, hypothetically, I could obviously imagine a scenario when it's possible. I think the reason we like have a intuition or like a deeper intuition that's wrong is because like humans tend to like they can suffer more intensely. There's a greater capacity just for future pleasure in humans than there is in animals. So we typically view it as a lot more wrong to take a human life because there's just a lot more, our lifespans are also just longer, like a lot more like life to live or whatever. But like I could imagine, and also we care instrumentally about the sanctity of human life, right? Like we want a society where we respect other people's lives because we just think that as a rule leads to overall good outcomes.
Saying it's okay in some ways to morally raise and consume them, no?
Again, I'm willing to concede certain facts about animals generating them having less moral status. I think that there are just still so many problems with the current system that
I mean, I don't think like Destiny is like he's pro abortion, pro killing babies. I don't know if you would say, I mean, I like agree with him that, you know, fetus up until a certain point isn't a person, but like, would it be intrinsically immoral to eat an aborted fetus? Like probably not. Like there'd be reasons why societally like it'd be disgusting or whatever and probably not lead to actually good outcomes. But are you gonna watch any deal book interviews? I don't know what that is.
It's in practice, you know, it's not something that's a real concern. For instance, I mean, most of the animals that are killed in the United States are babies. I mean, they're killed at a fraction of their natural lifespan. If, you know, the reason killing is wrong or death is bad is because it deprives a being of the future they would have otherwise had, then that seems like a seriously, you know, wrong action to take. And yeah, I know, I think most people, they don't know this, but if you ate like an animal product that was from an older animal, it doesn't taste as good. It's like a much tougher meat. Most people wouldn't enjoy it. So, yeah. And yeah, I guess the point I want to just fully reiterate is that someone who is trying to like eat humanely raised products, would have to be as diligent as a vegan, because they'd have to admit, to be charitable with this argument, you'd have to admit that if you make a mistake and you accidentally eat, you know, a fast food or something, or from a restaurant where you don't know what an animal product is, you'd have to admit that you've just done something that's somewhat equivalent to torturing a dog for the sake of hearing its screams. Yeah.
Stop you there. 5 minutes, Stephen. Might I talk for 5 minutes? No, I'm just
kidding. Discuss for eating an aborted fetus is the same as discuss towards gay sibling incest. I agree. Just vibes, bro.
That was a 5-minute warning. Sorry, you said that eating an animal would be the equivalent of hearing a dog scream. Well, I feel like there's a big difference there, because the person eating the animal is engaging.
Psychologically, if you're enjoying screaming a dog, it's going to imply that you have some sadistic attitude. So we're going to do that
like a
again.
biologically necessary function where we eat, and we know we need to eat to survive. Now, obviously, we don't need to eat animal products to survive, but I think that's a lot different than just torturing an animal.
Well, thanks.
For the sake of getting some kind of joyful response out of torturing the animal. I think that even when it comes to animal agriculture, this is the reason why like the PETA videos or, you know, whatever videos of animal ag are so effective, is because if people see somebody torturing an animal and all they see is like pain and suffering from the animal and somebody getting some kind of sick, twisted enjoyment out of it, even for an animal that we ordinarily eat, I think most people would be really uncomfortable.
Viewers watching, it's because I made a custom thumbnail and put Drew Gooden in the title.
Comfortable with that, but I also, does it not bother you, or I guess how do you address or deal with the fact that, you know, kind of like the animal kingdom, absolutely no moral systems or no moral treatment emerges from any of these animals either?
But also, that's like not that crazy for me on YouTube. That's not like if I'm doing a debate, I can get 15 viewers on YouTube. That's not particularly crazy.
Why would it be, for instance, unethical or immoral for a human to eat an animal, but it would be more ethical to leave that animal in the wilderness where another set of animals could, you know, kill it, often in kind of painful, excruciating ways, before they consume it?
Yeah.
Atoms or no moral treatment emerges from
I'm not sure I would hold that there, in this hypothetical, there is
these animals either
morally preferable situation there. Now, I think you could make some argument if you're not strictly a consequentialist to like say, oh, you know, when you do some action, you take on some extra obligations. You know, there's some difference between omission and commission. But like, that's obviously not what we're doing. If the two choices were between an animal getting, you know, eaten by some other animal in the wild, or an animal being eaten by a human, like, I probably wouldn't care. But we're bringing billions of animals into existence for the sole purpose of torturing them and eating them.
So why would it be, for instance, unethical?
I think your idea of not streaming much is low-key smart, pent up demand. True.
Or immoral for a human to eat an animal?
It's not really my idea. It's just that I'm really bad at time management.
But it would be more ethical to leave that animal in the wilderness where another set of animals could, you know, kill it, often in kind of painful, excruciating ways, before they can.
Like, we literally have bred species into existence just for factory farming. These are animals that some of these have like never even existed in the wild.
Yeah, I mean, the first problem with this kind of justification for why animals don't have moral status is that when we look at, you know, our own human species, we find beings that are incapable of this kind of reciprocal moral behavior.
I take Adderall substitute, dextro, fucking romanthine or whatever. I am noticeably less productive on days I don't take it, but even on days I do take it, sometimes I'm just bad at. I'm still just bad at actual time management. I'm just, whatever task I happen to actually do, I will do it quicker. But I'm not good at assigning myself tasks in a reasonable order and everything.
Like conservatives? I'm so joking. I'm just kidding. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
And we still think that these beings have moral status. Infants, severely cognitively disabled people, the elderly, the senile. Not the elderly, the senile.
So I understand this argument. It kind of runs into like this kind of like name the trade place. Like I would make an ontological argument here. I would say that like mankind or people kind, I don't know what we call it now, but like humanity has like these qualities to it where a fully developed person that's as realized as you can be biologically would be able to do all these things. One of these things is have the capacity for thought and reason such that social contracts and moral systems emerge. Now, maybe every single member of that class for some reason qualities to it where a fully developed person that's as realized as you can be biologically.
It seems like
I don't know what we call it now, but like humanity has like these qualities to it where a fully developed person that's as realized as you can be biologically would be able to do all these things. One of these things is have the capacity for thought and reason such that social contracts and moral systems emerge. Now, maybe every single
it's again essentially all I take away from this is it's just being of essentially a rational kind. It's just, I mean, he's not saying of a rational kind, but he's saying of a kind that is able to have a moral system. But like, I just don't. One, I think that would lead to reductios. Obviously, with like, I guess you could define, human being the kind. I mean, it seems relatively arbitrary to me. And like, even if you are a disabled human, you're still of the kind human, therefore entitled to the same rights or whatever. But even that, like, you can imagine, like, if humans were 51%, like 51% of humans born were like severely mentally disabled or whatever, would we no longer be of a kind that was rational enough to have whatever moral systems, or do we only need a few members to have enough capacity to have the whatever moral systems?
Member of that class for some reason, a brain injury or some other type of developmental error, isn't able to do it. But as a class of people, like, we would say that we have this thing, therefore we treat, our moral status only kind of works if we grant it to every single person in that category. We can't like pick and choose people in the category, because then the whole category itself becomes suspect. So I'm not fully convinced that just because
what is this like? This is like literally like the Lila Rose like argument against abortion. What are we doing?
some senile or very young children are incapable of reciprocating morals means that, well, that's the same thing as the whole animal kingdom, of all of which will never reciprocate morals. I don't find that argument very convincing.
Sure. And before I address that, I just want to point out that the view you're claiming to be more intuitive is highly unintuitive. The claim that the particular kind of being a being belongs to determines whether the pain that they experience matters morally is highly
unintuitive. Got removed from the AA. I know wokeness is back. I know. Just when I thought a white boy can't get a little motion nowadays. Unbelievable. Intuitive,
I think, to most people.
I know what you mean, but have you done therapy to help develop good habits for ADHD people? Only when I was like really a kid. I haven't really done. Obviously I had a psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever, one prescribed me to meds, but I don't do much like fucking CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. that meme. I don't know. I don't really do much of that stuff. I just do like, she was like, hey, is your blood pressure dying? Is your brain dying? Shit working? Right. We good.
And suppose you woke up tomorrow and you didn't know what you were.
Drugs don't magically cure everything. They're a tool alongside lifestyle change, sure.
And all you felt was just the most extreme agony you've ever experienced. It's like an unreflective agony. You're not thinking, wow, I'm in so much pain right now. I'm rational and I'm in so much pain. No, it's just extreme agony. If you ask yourself, or say you find out you're a pig or something like this. I don't know how this would be possible. I guess maybe you're behind a veil of ignorance and you like step back or something. If you find out you're a pig, should we think, wow, I guess my suffering didn't matter at all? This just seems highly unintuitive. But I guess to address your point about...
That is also if you do the veil of ignorance argument, I think obviously it would be highly intuitive. Like if you didn't know whether or not, I guess Destiny would just say, oh, it wouldn't matter, because if I was a pig, I wouldn't really be a pig. My consciousness. Did you do high school debate? No. It would be a fundamentally different kind of consciousness, but presumably, you'd want, insofar as you think your consciousness can in any way be represented as, it would be in a fucking pig or animal. You would not hold that the suffering of that doesn't matter behind the veil of ignorance.
Just real quick on for the example, again, I find this a form of intuition pumping, because it always feels like, imagine one day you wake up and you're just screaming in agony because you're part of a factory farm, and then the alternative realities it's like Charlotte's Web, where you're on a farm and everybody's happy and the spiders and the pigs and everybody get along with each other. Well, like, I'm trying to imagine what's it like living as like, a deer, and you wake up and there's like a leaf that's moving and you don't know if there's like 15 animals about to jump out and eat you, and that's literally every single day of your existence for your entire life until you get old enough that something finally catches up to you and eats you and you die. I don't know what, like, I mean, like, it's hard to even imagine, what is it like? If I think of like a cat or a dog,
We always used to woke feeling ignorance and debate.
Well, I'm a bad example because I do sit on the computer all day. But for most humans that like to go outside and see the sun and everything, like the idea of being locked up in a house all day seems horrible. But we consider that to be a more humane way to treat a cat than to let them roam the streets for a variety of reasons. So I understand we can intuition pump one way and say, well, this thing would definitely be bad. And it's like, I don't know, I don't even know what it's like to have an experience, like an animal like that. And I certainly wouldn't, because there are other experiences that they have that would be totally not okay to me, but they seem to enjoy or they seem to live in naturally. So.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up the problem of wild animal suffering, which is interesting. I mean, there are obvious disanalogies between the suffering of wild animals and the suffering we cause to animals on factory farms. I mean, for one, we cause the suffering to animals on factory farms. Animals in the wild, no moral agent is causing the suffering to another, another being, another sentient being. So maybe that plausibly explains the difference. Another thing is maybe you just accept that, like, yeah, wild animal suffering is bad, and we should do what we can to prevent wild animal suffering without, preventing or without allowing some similarly bad action like destroying an ecosystem. Yeah, so maybe that's one way you could explain that.
Does this argument? Okay, I'll make a quick comment. Can I give him the last? Because I feel bad if I have the last one. Well, I feel, does this argument not collapse into like a weird like antinatalist argument where you can say, well, factory farming
Oh my god.
is bad because it introduces a lot more
Well, I'll see you later, T-Money. I appreciate something.
suffering into the world, and if you just have like the wilderness as is, then there's going to be less suffering. But like, could I make the argument, for instance, like, well, I actually think it's super ethical if you eat only cats because they're obligate carnivores. So for every one cat you eat, you're actually saving like 1,000 other animals. And then could you just not run this ad infinitum until like the larger creature you eat, the less harmful and suffering there is, until like all the animals on the planet are dead and nobody's suffering anymore, and then you're gonna have the less.
I mean, obviously, did it say like? Not every animal on the planet has a net negative lives, and like in the real world, you'd expect some negative effect from, I think it's he gave cats as the example, right? Which like presumably it would not have some substantially negative effect on the environment insofar as you ate cats, which are responsible for eating birds, that might actually be positive for environmental health or whatever. But like there'd be some that has to do with the auto or whatever. Like there probably would be some like some out of predator calling or whatever that you could do that would harm the environment in such a way that it would actually have an overall net negative effect, because even to reduce wild animal suffering, maybe it fucks up the ecosystem enough that it makes human life unlivable there. Like there are plausibly examples of that as well. But
not sure I follow that. I'm wondering, could you repeat?
Well, because cats have to eat other animals to survive generally, right? They're obligate carnivores, not carnivores. Some cats are fun, but not that fun. So I'm just saying that, like, would it not be more ethical to kill or eat animals that only have to eat other animals? Like, if I eat one cat, that cat's not eating 100 other animals, so I'm reducing the suffering. And then could you just not run that same thing with every larger creature until you've eaten?
I guess the intensity would also matter, although plausibly, in most cases, it's going to be the case that carnivores are going to cause more suffering than they prevent or whatever.
Eradicated everything on the planet, so there's no more.
But also, technically, if you if you believe that the prey also live net negative lives, which it's totally possible many of them do, then it actually wouldn't be moral to save the lives of the wild animals from net negative lives.
Suffering, like a form of like animal anti-natalist argument.
Yeah, I mean, again, it seems implausible that you'd be able to do anything like this without destroying the ecosystem. But I mean, it's an interesting question whether we should, reduce the number of natural predators in a population. I think it's irrelevant to the question of whether we should be causing massive amounts of pain and suffering to sentient beings for trivial benefits. But it is an interesting question. I'm just not sure how it fully relates to the factory farming question. And I guess, yeah, I mean, the last point I just want to emphasize is that the amount of suffering we cause to factory farmed animals in a few years is probably equivalent to the amount of suffering that every human on Earth has ever experienced in the history of humanity. This is just true if you run the numbers and you look at the neuroscientific data that suggests that non-human animals, especially land mammals, experience roughly the same amount of pain and pleasure that humans do, given the same amount of aversive stimuli. That fact makes veganism such a heavy moral imperative. I think it's an interesting question whether animals have a right to life in the way humans do, whether it's right, it's permissible to humanely raise and kill an animal. The fact of the matter is that this is just not how the world is right now, and people should be vegan. Contingently, Destiny, you should be vegan until we develop cultivated meat, better plant-based meat. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that was interesting, but I remain unconvinced. Thank you for watching, and if you want to help me continue to make content, liking, subscribing, and commenting are all greatly appreciated. You can also make sure to check out my Twitch, my Kick, and my Twitter down below, or consider becoming a member to my YouTube channel, which really helps support me as well.